Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to share with you what I read in April. This might be a bit of a weird wrap up because some of the books I read I can't share with you yet because I am reading them for the BookTube prize. I also DNF'd a lot, but I will share kind of my thoughts on the books that I DNF'd. So let's start with the BookTube prize books. I just want to mention them in case they are something that interests you. You will know to check out my video at the end of, it'll be at the end of May, beginning of June when I can share my thoughts on them. I don't have them in front of me, so I'm not going to remember the authors' names, most likely. But I read the Lumumba plot. I do remember the author is Stuart Reid, and this is about the first president of the Congo and the CIA plot to assassinate him and kind of the beginning of that country as it gains independence from Belgium, and it's about Patrice Lumumba specifically. So I read that book. I read The Wager by the author's last name is Grann. I forget the first name, and that is about a shipwreck in the mid 1700s off the coast of Chile and the murder and mutiny that happened on this deserted island where they shipwrecked and kind of the fallout from that. And then I also read The Dictionary People by Sarah Ogilvie, and that is about all of the different people who helped in the creation of the Oxford English Dictionary back in the 18 to early 1900s, late 1800s to early 1900s. So those are the three books I read for the BookTube prize. I can't really share my thoughts on the books yet, but stay tuned for a wrap up on those books at some point. Should I start with the DNFs or the books I finished? I'm going to start with the two other books that I finished, and then we'll do the DNFs. So I finished Leave the World Behind by Rumaan. I've already returned this book. I bought it from my mother-in-law, and I was surprised that I didn't fall in either a love it or hate it camp for this book because it seems to be quite a polarizing book and most readers fall into one of those extremes. But I was kind of right down the middle. I think it was well written. I think that the characters were really interesting, but it wasn't the kind of suspense that I was expecting or I think the book was trying to accomplish. I thought the ending was really good, but like getting through the book needed some more substance, needed some more tension between the characters. This is an apocalyptic book where you don't really know exactly what's happening. The book starts with this family who is going on vacation, so they are leaving New York City and going to Staten Island or Long Island or somewhere close by, and they've rented like this Airbnb. This couple shows up to the door saying that there's been this power outage, something weird's happening, and that they are the owners of the house. We don't really know what's going on because although their house still has electricity, like the television networks are done, it just says like emergency broadcast and there's no information. They saw a couple of alerts on their phone about a power outage, but like now the internet's down, like the phones are down, so they can't get any information. The only way to really figure out what's happening would be to go back to New York City, and they're not sure that that's the right move. And so a lot of this book is following them just becoming more obsessed with wanting information and not being able to get information and just kind of trapped in this house together. There's like some racial elements with the white family who has rented the property and with the black owners. I don't think that racial tension did as much as it could have in the book, but it was an interesting element of it. I think that the book was trying to be quite suspenseful, but it just didn't do it for me. I don't think the atmosphere was quite there. There were a few moments here and there, but the tension really didn't build. I think the ending was really good, but the story didn't progress to that point. It just kind of happened. And so it was a bit flatter than it could have been. I liked the characters. I think they were all interesting. It was really interesting to see how they were dealing with this lack of information, how they were dealing with possibly being in a survival scenario, and how ill-equipped they are for that scenario, and how they were taking actions that were surprising to themselves, that they didn't realize what they would be like in an emergency situation. So that was all interesting, but I just think like as a whole, it didn't like live up to what it could have been. Very middle of the road for me. Thankfully, the other book that I finished was 5 stars. I loved it. It is The Electric State by Simon Stålenhag. This is a narrative art book. That's how it was described. The artwork really are the focal point, and there's not a lot of text, and the story really is in service to the artwork and not really the other way around, although I did enjoy the story. It is about a teenage girl and a little robot sidekick that she has. And this is set in an alternate 1997 in the Western United States, or what would be the Western United States, in the fictional state of Pacifica. And she is traveling from the desert towards the coast. We don't really know what her goal is at first. That reveals itself as the story continues. For a lot of the story, there isn't a whole lot of plot. We're just kind of following her as she travels, as she's having thoughts, as she's remembering times before this kind of apocalyptic state existed. And it's also intercut with a different point of view, which is a lot more context driven and about the history and the background of this world and about the technology and a little bit about the war. So there was obviously some sort of war where pilots controlled these remote drones. And so the landscape is littered with all of this old tech and old drones sitting around. And it was just the coolest artwork. The contrast between this old decaying technology sitting abandoned on these vast, beautiful landscapes and in these cities or towns was just beautiful, but also quite grim and sad. And I just absolutely loved it. There wasn't a whole lot of plot through it. You're just kind of following her at first, but then there is quite a satisfying ending. There's a bit more plot towards the end, and it was just enough to keep me engaged in an actual story, although the artwork was great on its own. So I am so happy that I finally read this, and I am trying my hardest to get my hands on his other books, which I'm having a hard time really finding where I'm at, a way to get them to me at a cost that is reasonable, but just phenomenal. Loved this book so much. So we'll end on the 3 books that I DNF'd. I don't know how much I'll have to say about them. The first book I DNF'd was Louis de Bernières' Birds Without Wings. I loved his other book, Captain Crowley's Mandolin. It was a 5-star when I read it however many years ago. And this has some similarities in terms of there being a lot of characters and a lot of different points of views, and you can see that eventually a lot of these stories are going to come together in some sort of way. But I felt like this took that to a level that was too hard to follow, where there's too many characters, where it's not clear how these stories are going to come together at all, where there's so many characters that you can't really care about them, that they're hard to differentiate or keep track of. And I got 100 pages into this, and at 100 pages, I couldn't have summarized what this book was about, because at that point, you're just getting all of these disparate, separate stories or points of view, even not really stories. And I couldn't make heads or tails of what this book was about. And I couldn't feel anything towards any particular character because we didn't get to see much of any one particular character by that point, 100 pages in. So I just couldn't do it anymore. What I do know about this book is it is set during the fall of the Ottoman Empire and right before the start of the First World War. So that's the time period. It is set in a place in modern day Turkey where Muslims and Christians coexisted, and I'm sure the story played into how these people with these different religions eventually had that relationship fractured eventually with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, but I didn't get anywhere close to anything of substance happening. So unfortunately, I DNF'd that. And yeah, that was a real bummer because I loved Captain Crowley's Mandolin so much. The next book I DNF'd, I didn't get nearly so far. I only got, oh my gosh, I don't know, maybe like 30 pages, 20 pages. Not very far at all. That's Roddy Doyle's Paddy Clarke, ha ha ha. I have read Roddy Doyle's The Van, which I didn't love, but I liked a lot of elements of it. Particularly, I loved the characters. And that was enough to get me through that particular book. I don't think Roddy Doyle, at least from my limited experience, is big on plot, which I like to have at least a bit of plot. And it became apparent very quickly to me that this was going to be a series of vignettes and there wasn't going to be much of a through line. So I decided to DNF it because I knew that the characters alone weren't going to pull me through this particular story. It is about a young boy growing up in Ireland in the 1960s. And he's hanging out with his friends. They're going down to the construction site. They're getting into mischief, getting into like dangerous situations that little kids back in the 60s with limited supervision probably got into. And I liked the characters and I liked the writing in all these little vignettes, but when they're not going anywhere, I just have a hard time to become motivated to read anything else. I feel like, okay, I got a snapshot of who this character is. Why do I need another 20 snapshots? I've got it. I can move on. I'm sure there's more to this book than that, but I just could not motivate myself to pick it up, and just not my kind of book. But the writing was great. There just wasn't enough else to keep me interested, but I think it is probably a good book, but I didn't get very far into it. And the last book I DNF'd, I was listening to as an audiobook, and I got 50% of the way through this. And it was a short book. I think in physical format is probably between 90 and 100 pages. So the fact that I DNF'd this says a lot. The book is called They by K. Dick. And just the premise sounded really interesting to me. However, I got, as I said, 50% of the way into this book, and I don't know what was going on. It is some sort of dystopian apocalyptic type of book. It is kept, I think, purposely vague and ambiguous. I wanted a little bit more world building. I didn't like the vagueness and the ambiguity of this one. I'm struggling even to describe what this book is. We know that there's some sort of dystopian type element. We never get any name of who they are. We don't know if it's the government, if it's some sort of like fringe fanatical group, if this is like some sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland and they are a group of people who are like oppressing other people, or if they are actually authority in this world. We don't know, and I'm pretty sure that the entire book you don't get any answers to that. They will occasionally come, and if they find any, I think the thread here is any pieces of art, so paintings, literature, your own journals or writing. If they find that, you get punished. People are blinded, deafened, they have limbs cut off. There are a bunch of characters who are living, I don't know if they were in a commune or if they were just living separately, but they kind of knew each other and they were all either artists or like keepers of this art. It had kind of like, it was reminiscent a little bit about how in Fahrenheit 451, people are trying to memorize books to be the keepers of literature. That's the vibe I got, is that these people were trying to keep art, maintain art, create art in this society where they, the capital they in the story, is seeking to destroy it and to punish anyone who has it. That's what I think was going on. This book was 100% atmosphere and 0% anything else, so didn't get a really good sense of the plot. And I think more importantly, because I can sometimes get by on really great atmosphere, really cool worlds, not much plot, if there's also some form of characterization. But the characters just were a whole lot of nothing. I didn't care about them people were getting picked up by them and, returned with a missing limb, and I didn't care. So even though it was so short, and I kept telling myself, come on, Melissa, you can finish this like 90 some odd page book. It's like a 2-hour audiobook. But I just couldn't. I got halfway through and I'm like, no, I just don't want to finish this book. So that was my last DNF of the month. Hopefully, May is a better reading month for me. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what your thoughts are, especially if you finished any of those 3 books that I DNF'd. I would love to know, like, what's the deal with these books? And did they end well? How did they work for you? Anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.